Our next thing is the community moment, and that is where one of our members gets up and gives a brief talk about something that's important to them. Oftentimes, it's their journey to free thought, or just a little story about something that they want to share with all of us. Today's presenter is Eric Anderson. He's VP of Oasis, I read somewhere. Obviously he's been an integral part of Houston Oasis. We've seen him up here, especially in the last couple of weeks, telling us about the Houston Meet Me at Oasis campaign. He's been the one giving us the fantastic news. And he's been previously presenting on a variety of topics. He's introduced us to the hypothetical Gary, and also told us about the decreasing utility of beer, which it was kind of theoretical, so maybe we want to check into that and verify the theory there a little bit. But he's here today to talk to us about Freethought and Ideology. Thank you, Eric.
Wow, thank you, Verena, for that very generous introduction. Like Verena mentioned, I am Eric Anderson, and I am the Joe Biden of Oasis. Or is that Dick Cheney? Gary would go with Dick Cheney, but... Sorry, a little bit of political humor. Before I get started, actually, I want to share something that TC told me last week that I thought was very clever. Obviously, we already have our tagline. We are a community of compassion and reason. But TC proposed an alternative tagline to Oasis. Oasis, it's unbelievable. Okay, that was a pretty bad pun. Sorry about that. All right, so I want to give a full disclaimer before I get into my topic today. Obviously, I'm talking about ideology. I felt like it was a good topic because we did just get out of the political season. I think we've all had a little bit of time to calm down since the election. So why don't we talk a little bit about free thought and ideology, how those two interact. And for the purpose of this talk, I want to define ideology simply as a system of ideas. So that would include religion. Religion obviously is an ideology. Like I mentioned before, political parties are ideologies as well. That's the obvious one. That's the one that everybody thinks about. And then a little bit less commonly, conventionally accepted standards of social behavior would also fit that definition of ideology. And I really think that as free thinkers, sometimes we don't give ourselves enough credit, because being a free thinker is a really risky enterprise in that regard. And it can sometimes give us a complete lack of propriety. I want to give you an example of that. So Jess and I, and I'm very glad she's in the audience today, my wife Jessica, we are very lucky to have her parents living here in town. And it's always been a great thing, but it's been especially a great thing since we had Preston, our son, because having her parents here in town means we always have a babysitter nearby. And it means that we have great interaction with her parents as far as, getting some hands-on parenting advice and whatnot. It also means that we get the opportunity to have weekly lunches with them. And at every one of these weekly lunches, Kathy, Jess's mom, who's a very gracious host, usually prepares lunch, and at the end of it all, she'll ask us, she'll say, so, like the gracious host that she is, how did everybody enjoy their meal? And we always say, it was fantastic, Kathy, as it always is. Thank you so much for preparing it for us. Now, that's an ideology, a little bit, right? Because the accepted rule of son-in-law, mother-in-law interaction, when it comes to critiquing your mother-in-law's cooking, is to never, ever, 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 ever do that, right? But I'm a free thinker, okay? And a free thinker, I do not bind myself to simple ideology. So, time and time again, Kathy would ask, how was the meal and everything? And I began to rationalize, I think Kathy isn't just after a compliment here. I bet that she's looking for a critique of her cooking so she can improve it. I think you can all see where this story's going, right? So the next time we're over at Jess's parents' house and, she prepares an excellent meal and she asks us, how did everybody enjoy anything? This big idiot free thinker over here goes, the cake's a little bit dry. There's something important to remember about in-laws. In-laws, unlike your parents, have no blood relation to you. They're not required to love you or even like you. All right? And sometimes, you know how you have an idea and in your head it sounds really good and then it comes out and it's something completely different. Well, this was one of those moments, and I think she told me something along the lines of, well, you don't have to have any cake if you don't like it, Eric, which was an appropriate response. I'm very grateful for the fact that I think Kathy and I still have a great relationship in spite of that. But I learned an important lesson that day. Beyond not to critique your mother-in-law's cooking, I learned that being a free thinker and coming up with your own original thoughts does not mean that those thoughts are always going to be correct. There's no guarantee of that. And that's really what I mean when I'm talking about the riskiness of being a free thinker. Ideologies, like the ideology of what to say about your mother-in-law's cooking, often exist for a reason. So we should at least give them some credit. But when it comes to ideology, a free thinker may be a supporter but never a subscriber of ideology. There's an important difference. A supporter of ideology is someone who shares common beliefs, ideas, or goals with that ideology, while a subscriber is someone who inherits their ideas, beliefs, or goals from the ideology. The difference is not in the conclusion. You cannot judge someone as a free thinker from their conclusions, but rather in how we arrive at our conclusions. Now, I don't doubt that most everyone here is a supporter of some kind of a political ideology, and I'm not criticizing that as I am too. What I am saying, though, is that we should work to maintain our impartial judgment, which is critical to being a free thinker. And I want to talk about some of the biases that we are perhaps unknowingly subjecting ourselves to through our political or ideological associations. And the first one is the bandwagon effect. The bandwagon effect is identifying with or holding close to the image that often accompanies an ideology. Now, like we've heard from Mike many times before and many other presenters, humans, we are a tribal species. This is absolutely evident. It's especially evident as we're all gathered here today in a group of common values, wherever they are, in the back. That's where they are. We have a tendency to identify with a group surrounding an ideology, oftentimes without regard for the ideology itself. Now, that can be dangerous, and this is one that kind of hits home personally to me. As many of you know, I'm formerly a Mormon. And when I was a member of the Mormon Church, looking back in hindsight, my commitment to that ideology was not because of their system of ideas, but because of the group surrounding those ideas. Another great example of the bandwagon effect, of course, is sports fans, who, beyond mountains of evidence and mountains of reasoning, still believe that the Astros are a good team. And they're not willing to accept it any other way. They are falling victim to the bandwagon effect. And of course, political ideology can create strong cognitive allegiances to political parties. And I'll tell you, one of the problems with that is that we have a very binary political system in this country. It creates a mentality of us versus them, which in large part is a false dichotomy of viewpoints. What freethinker would limit their scope of ideas to two seemingly opposing viewpoints? When you look at every single political issue and every single issue, I doubt there are only two possible solutions to the problem. And subscribing to a binary political system can cause us to forget those alternative solutions. Now, the next bias that we're potentially subjecting ourselves to is one I think everybody here is familiar with. We've all heard of it before, confirmation bias. It's the tendency to seek out only evidence that supports our existing position and ignore all evidence to the contrary. In my last presentation, I talked a lot about human tendency towards loss aversion, and I think confirmation bias is kind of seated in our human tendency towards loss aversion because we all want to avoid the pain and cognitive dissonance of realizing that perhaps we were wrong. One of the hardest lessons I've ever learned since leaving the Mormon Church is not to debate my Mormon family and friends on Mormonism. And I'll tell you why. Because in the countless debates that I've had with my family and friends over Mormonism, I have never once succeeded in convincing anyone of my viewpoint. I have, however, succeeded in inadvertently destroying friendships and damaging my relationship with my family, something that has taken years to repair. I believe that there is more value in maintaining good relationships than there is in trying to win an argument. In short, you might say that I believe that people are more important than beliefs. Somebody write that down. Isn't that a good idea? People are more important than beliefs. On the flip side of this, of avoiding pointless debate, it's also important as a freethinker to remain always open to considering new evidence. Now, if we simply just ignore every time we're prompted into a debate or anytime somebody wants to make an argument that opposes our viewpoints, we're also falling victim to confirmation bias. So I believe there's a middle ground. There's a way we can politely listen and engage people with opposing viewpoints so that we can take in information while trying to shift the conversation away from a debate and towards a more productive discussion. All right, the last bias I want to talk about is the halo effect. The halo effect is a tendency for a person's positive or negative traits to spill over from one personality area to another in our perspective of them. Now, one of the examples of this that I think is commonly used are leaders. There's a lot of research that's been done on how we tend to pick our leaders. And a lot of the time, people select their leaders based on qualities that have no value in leadership. They'll select leaders based on their height, or based on their attractiveness, or something else. What they're doing is falling victim to the halo effect, because they're allowing their perspective of those seemingly positive qualities to spill over into something that is unrelated to leadership value. This bias can create difficulty in measuring the true qualities of, say, a political candidate may possess when the perceived positive or negative qualities of the candidate's political party can push us to make sudden and unsubstantiated judgments. It's very easy to fall victim to it because it's very easy, like Mike was talking about last week, to categorize and label people. And once we've assigned that label to them, we immediately fall victim to the halo effect, whereas we are applying this positive or negative perspective to all their traits when really we should keep it separate. Now, I am no fan of the word idiot. In fact, I really dislike the word idiot. And it's not because of any inherent quality of the word idiot. It's because I think it's an overused platitude among atheists to simply dismiss all of their religious opponents or political opponents as idiots. When you do something so simple as that, you are falling victim to the halo effect. You are taking their personal beliefs and allowing them to spill over into your perspective of their intelligence. And also, you're kind of being an asshole, too. So that's not something that benefits the image of the group. It is very, okay. I'm not going to touch that. Moving on. In summary, ideology is a powerful mechanism for the proliferation of an idea. The benefits of ideology are far-reaching in the amount of potential good that can be shared efficiently. Conversely, ideology has, throughout history, proven its equal potential for spreading nefarious ideals. The power of ideology to do harm is largely removed when participants make and evaluate their own decisions through reason and free thought. Thank you.